engaging with the community since 1970. This is WIS Awareness with Billie Jean Shaw, a Black History Month special.
Thank you so much for joining us for Awareness. Happy Sunday to you. I'm your host, Billie Jean Shaw. All month long on Awareness, we are highlighting Black history makers across the Midlands. Kicking off our series this week is Orangeburg native and world-renowned photographer Cecil Williams. Now, you may remember that I spoke with Mr. Williams back in January on Awareness, but I wanted to share his interview once more because you cannot mention Black history in South Carolina without mentioning the man who has captured it all. For decades, Cecil Williams has compiled one of the largest collections of civil rights events by any photographer in the country. He now owns South Carolina's first and only civil rights museum in Orangeburg, which highlights a number of historic images he's captured, including Briggs versus Elliott. That's the case in Clarendon County, where petitioners really lit the torch to end segregation in schools across the country. Also, the Orangeburg Massacre, and he even holds the title as President John F. Kennedy's favorite cameraman. He speaks about those historic moments in a very candid interview. Take a listen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for the invitation to invite me.
Yeah, it's an honor to talk to you and to see you and the work you've done. Absolutely amazing, the impact that you've made, especially with the civil rights movement, and showing people just what we were living with here in the South is something that, you know, words cannot describe. So thank you so much. To that note, in the 1950s, you started photography before that as a young boy, but in the 1950s, you picked up your camera and you captured so many historic moments. What was going through your mind at the time for you to say, somebody needs to capture this, someone needs to keep this piece of history?
Well, starting at 9 years old, the camera became a tool for me. I like to draw, but the camera seemed to allow me to express myself more fully. It freezes a moment in time, and of course, as history unravels and goes on a long journey, it's able to capture those moments and freeze them for all to see, and then putting them to paper as it was in the early days when we were in print and film, and now in digital. It allows something that mimics life like no other kind of medium. It's so real, next to life. That's what photography is all about.
Yeah, and we're taking a look at some of your images right now. Some of the historic moments that you captured. Thurgood Marshall alongside John F. Kennedy as he was campaigning to become president. The first black student accepted into Clemson University, Harvey Gantt, who then became the first black mayor in the city of Charlotte. You also had shell casings that had been scattered on the grounds at SC State University, fired by Highway Patrol during the Orangeburg Massacre. Then Coretta Scott King's public appearance, 1969, for the Charleston Hospital's workers' strike, which then became the cover story for Jet magazine. When you hear your accomplishments, and that is just a very quick summary, guys, for everyone watching. That is not even going into the thick of it. But when you think about the moments you've captured and where your pictures have traveled to, did you know they were going to make this big of an impact?
Certainly not. In the midst of things happening, you rarely do. But I'd like to say that none of us stand on our own merits of doing something. We stand on the shoulders of so many in whatever endeavor we're involved in. And so many things that happen in my life and my ability to be at the right place at the right time, I really relate it to maybe being a divine reason why I was there. Sometimes I put myself into a news event or something was happening. My favorite picture of Coretta Scott King, which made the cover of Jet magazine, it was very competitive among other Jet photographers to make the front cover. And that was my first and only cover I made with Jet, working with them for over 10 years. So wow. Even though it didn't pay but about $250 extra, it was well worth it to capture this great lady who really took up the mantle after her slain husband, Dr. Martin Luther King, was assassinated in Tennessee.
For people watching who may be a little young and may not really know when they're looking at these pictures what was actually happening in real time at the moment, take us back to the civil rights movement in the years, and how did you feel being out there? Were you scared? Were you nervous capturing these moments?
Well, certainly it was a badge of merit, you might say, to really be associated with marching and demonstrating. And of course, most of the time that I was involved in the 1960s civil rights movement activities, it was just a thing to do. I went to jail twice for taking photographs, but I was marching and demonstrating just like the other students that were accompanying me at the time. The only difference was that I had a camera and I was able to capture. A lot of times when marching in Columbia or Orangeburg or Charleston, I would step out of line to get in front of the group that is marching to capture the picture and then get back in line. But police and law enforcement did not really like being photographed. I believe in their hearts they realized that they were enforcing laws and things against people, human beings, and I don't think they really felt right by doing that.
Yeah, I want to show our viewers one of my favorite pictures of you, if we can pull that up. And you guys may remember this picture. It's Mr. Williams leaning over the whites-only water fountain. What was happening in that moment? And that was pretty bold at that time because segregation was happening, and obviously black people were not allowed to use white-labeled facilities. So you were being very brave doing that.
My mother chewed me out for, of course, making that step. That was something that was a little bit on the brazen side. But that event really was took place because I was really thirsty and I wanted something to drink. I was coming back from an assignment. And the laws of South Carolina, which governed a lot of the segregation that we faced, was one thing. But in each town throughout, especially South Carolina, there were things that you could not do and things that you should not do, and places you should not go. And one of them was that you should not drink out of a white-only water fountain. But I was thirsty, and I really drank out of it. And again, my friend, high school chum friend, who also accompanied me to this event, took the picture of me drinking out of the fountain, and I took his picture drinking out of the fountain. So It's a very memorable event.
What has been your favorite moment that you've captured?
There's a picture of a little boy holding his mother's hand, and it seems to really be the an icon of the civil rights movement era. That child looking up at his mother amid the scene was photographed at a civil rights demonstration here in Columbia, in fact, that later turned to what is called an event. It is known as the Edwards versus South Carolina event, where students were arrested. But I looked to my left and I saw this child among the adults around him, and I aimed my camera at him. At the moment he was in shadows, but just at the minute as I took the photograph, a ray of sunshine seemed to have come through the clouds. So indeed it was a special moment for me.
Wow. Do you ever sit back and reflect on you living in this time, the Jim Crow era, segregation, and now in 2023, we've seen some of the same things repeated over the years when it comes to police brutality and just the discrimination against people of color. When you reflect on that moment and coming through that, living through it and coming through that, how does that make you feel?
Well, certainly we need the support of law enforcement in our communities, and it's something that we should not deny. But so often those things that makes the news would be police and law enforcement really doing the wrong thing and treating people unjustly, and they should be identified, and that's something that should be brought forth so that it won't happen as often. Young men, you might say, driving while black and really being subjected to rigid law enforcement. But given the things that were going on at the time, these were crucial times where we were really changing the Constitution. We were changing the state constitution and the laws that govern segregation, and also the federal Constitution. So it was worth it. It was worth the sacrifices that we made to take those chances at changing things.
And coming up on Awareness, we will continue our conversation with Cecil Williams as he takes us inside of his Civil Rights Museum in Orangeburg. Again, that's the state's first and only Civil Rights Museum. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Awareness, everyone. We are continuing to highlight Cecil Williams, world-renowned civil rights photographer who is the founder of South Carolina's first and only Civil Rights Museum, and is in his hometown of Orangeburg. As I mentioned before the break, this interview originally aired in January, but I wanted to share Mr. Williams' story with you once more because you cannot mention Black history in South Carolina without mentioning his name. Joining us now, Cecil Williams, the founder of the museum, alongside Janie Harriott. She is the executive director for programs and development for the museum, and Valencia Goodwin, who is the arts educator. Thank you all so much for coming on the show. Mr. Cecil, thank you for staying with us for this very impactful conversation. Before the break, we were talking about all the historic images that you have captured. What motivated you to put it all in one spot for a museum?
Most of the states in the Deep South have a civil rights museum to pay tribute to those people who sacrificed so much to bring about change in America. We moved from a segregated society to that of a more integrated society. Of course, the journey has not been completed yet, and we have a ways to go to really accomplish where we are a colorblind society. But we needed something like this because so many people really sacrificed to march, demonstrate, put their lives up to make a change. And there should be some place where those events and those people are honored and remembered.
Yes, and this is a very extensive museum. I wanted to give you a look inside, if we can pull that video up. Ms. Harriott, there are 20 exclusive exhibits inside of this museum. Tell us a little bit more about the design and the layout, and when visitors come, what they're going to experience.
Well, when you come into the museum, and this is all Cecil's brain work, you have several rooms. You have a room that's dedicated to Briggs versus Elliott. Of course, we know that Briggs versus Elliott, it should be Briggs versus Elliott versus the United States rather than Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yes, yes.
Because the Briggs case was the first case for integration of schools in the country.
Happening right in Clarendon County.
Happening right in Clarendon County, and a forgotten story or not told story. But when you come into the museum, Cecil has a room that's dedicated to Briggs versus Elliott, and in it he has all these wonderful images, but he also has the Bible from the Briggs family, the Pearson family, and the Delane family. So you can stay in there for hours and hours. And then we have a new room, which is the Jim Clyburn room. And Cecil, which one did I forget?
Well, we have a museum that is composed of about 5 different areas and about 35 exhibits. But the Matthew Perry, he was that great attorney. A courthouse is named in his honor here in Columbia. And he is, of course, highlighted in this room. We also have a room dedicated to the pursuits of Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall was that attorney who came to Clarendon County, South Carolina, who took that Briggs case all the way from South Carolina to the Supreme Court. And as Ms. Harriott mentioned, it is so unfortunate that the Supreme Court case was named Brown instead of Briggs, as it should have been.
Yeah, it definitely should have been. Anyone who knows about the history, again, I have expressed to you guys, that's my hometown, so we knew about it there. And it just goes to show you all of the history, the civil rights history in South Carolina. Valencia, tell us about your role with the museum.
My role as the arts educator director is to mainly attract schools in different counties like Clarendon County, Colleton County, surrounding counties, to make sure that the children have access and they know about the museum. Just a fun fact that when I was first started, I learned that a lot of people weren't aware of the Civil Rights Museum, so that is pretty much my position, is make sure that everyone has access to the museum. They create field trips, and it also put lesson plans inside the schools, different schools.
That is so important, because oftentimes people think that the young people know because they're living there. And I bet you guys are shocked that the amount of students that come through there, and they're like, I didn't know this happened, or this happened in South Carolina. This person visited South Carolina. And it's probably shocking, but it's so important to keep those lessons going. The museum also seems to be somewhat interactive, where you're able to read about what you're looking at.
Yes, we have a lot of exhibits that really have that capability. We have one exhibit really that is about the Briggs case again. The only two places in South Carolina where that virtual reality experience can be had is the Charleston Visitor Center and, of course, our museum. But you can actually see and the people who are now famous involved in the Briggs case moving around and have become live figures. Also, I'd like to add that this is not done in a void, in a vacuum, without the assistance of people like Mrs. Harriet and others. We would not be able to really have pulled this off. Most museums cost millions of dollars, and most museums have taken a long period of time to develop. Here in 3 years, with less than $1 million, we have again a state-of-the-art museum in Orangeburg for you to visit right now. We, however, do have some growing pains. We don't have enough space to really put all of the things. Besides the photographs, we have the largest collection of artifacts and other items that are pertinent to these cases and the history that we tell about South Carolina's hijack history, as I like to call it.
That's really good. Are you looking for people to help or volunteers to help expand the museum?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And contribute artifacts that are still out there. You see, so much of this generation has died, and those artifacts might be in scrapbooks, they might be in the closet. Well, there's a place in Orangeburg that you can really have them exhibited, and that we would appreciate people contributing to this effort.
Tell people how they can donate and how they can help continue to pour funds into the museum.
The best way to get in touch with us, of course, is to look on the internet, cecilwilliams.com. You'll find our address and other information there. You can contribute. Yes, we always need funds. I'd like to especially put a shout out to Congressman James Clyburn. He's been so helpful in really helping us to realize what we are trying to do in Orangeburg, and many, many others. But it takes contributions like this to pull this all off, and we are grateful to each and every one of them.
And thoroughly enjoyed talking to Mr. Williams. Of course, check out his Civil Rights Museum in Orangeburg. We'll have all the details online. And still to come on Awareness, Columbia, get ready to celebrate Black History with the 18th Annual Caramoo Black History Parade and Festival. We're going to speak with the organizer of this great event. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Awareness, everyone. Saturday, February 25th. Funds, which stands for Friends United as a Neighborhood Developmental Society Incorporated. They're hosting their 18th annual Black History Parade and Festival in downtown Columbia. This event will celebrate Black History Month and Black History makers all across the Midlands. Joining us on Awareness today to talk all about it is Ovita Glover. She is the founder of Funds and the creator behind this parade. So tell us about the 18th annual Black History Parade and Festival. You've been doing it bigger and better each year, so I'm looking forward to seeing what's in store for this year.
First, I want to invite everybody out.
Yeah.
Please come out. Well, we started back in 2005. As you said, it's been 18 years, and we have grown throughout the years thanks to the people that believed in what we were doing, and it was to highlight African American history for the state of South Carolina. And I'm not talking about, I mean, we could do any and all that they wanted to do. Those that participate in it have to depict someone of African American history. It could be a flyer saying that Ovita Glover was the first or whomever they chose to depict. Folks can walk away with some type of history. If they don't read it, they can hear it, and they'll be able to walk away to speak it. And that makes a difference, being able to speak what you learn.
So the parade will start at the corner of Hardin Street.
It will start at the corner of Hardin and Hampton Street, and we will parade down through 5 Points and end up at Martin Luther King Park, and that's where the festivities will begin. Our grand marshals for this year, I'm excited, is Congressman James Clyburn and Representative Annie McDaniels. Annie was one of the first, her district is District 41, and she was one of the first African-American female representatives to come out of that area. And I just thought it was enough to highlight her, because we are moving and pushing, and she's on fire.
That's amazing. Are you still looking for people to participate in the parade?
Yes, we are. We are looking for parade participants and vendors.
And so as far as participants in the parade, you mentioned earlier you want them to depict a Black history maker. And give us a little bit more detail about that. It can be a church group, it can be friends,
anybody that's, it's a typical parade. So anybody that wants to participate in the parade can also, that's one of our requirements, depict someone of African American history. It could be a poster of somebody as they're riding, so they can see, oh, who's this? And then when they get in the festival, even the vendors have to have something on their vending tables and stuff like that, some type of history about an African American.
This has been a successful event for the past 18 years. When you created it 18 years ago, did you imagine that it was going to grow the way it has?
Well, no. In fact, I wanted to stop the fourth year, but I was encouraged because when I took this event to, and I have to give him props, the past Mayor Coble, he really liked the idea, and he said, let's do it, let's make it happen. And that's how it started, with him in my head all the time and some others saying, hey, you have to continue this. That's how we made it to 18 years.
Oh, man, that is amazing. And thank you so much for doing your part to make sure that Black History Month is celebrated here in the capital city. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you what's coming up on next week's show. Thank you to our guest today, Cecil Williams, world-renowned civil rights photographer and the founder of the state's first and only Civil Rights Museum. It's located at 1865 Lake Drive in Orangeburg. Make sure you check it out. Also, a huge thank you to Ovita Glover, the organizer of the 18th Annual Black History Parade and Festival happening downtown Columbia on February 25th. It's going to be a lot of fun, mixed with an educational experience. And next week on Awareness, I'm taking you to my hometown of Clarendon County as we explore the history of Pleasant Grove. That's the first public school for Black students in the county. I can't wait to see you next week. Have a good one.